For me, for private school, I'd abolish all of them. I don't see the point.
Really?
And I think the fact.
Yeah, no. As someone who's like wasn't born in the UK, I also just find like the attitudes, like I've said, about different politics fascinating because I pay attention quite a lot to American politics.
Yeah.
And I feel like in the UK, the biggest difference between the UK and America kind of generally is in America, there's kind of, and this is for better or for worse, this isn't like a better or worse judgment.
Yeah.
In America, they see success as like a laudable. Like this is like, whether rightly or wrongly, if you have money, if you've done something, they're like, that's impressive.
Yeah.
In the UK, there's kind of this perception that it's ill-gotten gains, and probably attached to the fact that we do have legitimate ill-gotten gains in class and stuff like that. So I just find it interesting because no one has really cared at all. Like Rishi Sunak is our first person of color prime minister, but it almost doesn't feel real because he's so rich. But I mean, maybe if he was American, his story might be reinterpreted.
Possibly, but I don't know whether, because this is what I remember about when Rishi Sunak became prime minister. I think it was on the Late Show, one that when Trevor Noah was presenting it, and he talked about like the backlash and kind of like alluded to the idea because of his race. And I remember following that. Now maybe because I'm white, I don't necessarily pick up on like certain things that are being said. But when I looked into like the backlash towards Rishi Sunak becoming prime minister, I found like one angry caller on LBC, and that was it. Now maybe there was more, and it wouldn't surprise me if there was. But again, I think a lot of it was just like, I don't know whether it was like the time that the circumstances in which he became prime minister. We'd obviously had like the whole like Liz Truss disaster class, and then it was just kind of like Rishi Sunak's going to steady the ship. The ship's got like a lot of holes in it and it's gonna sink, but you know, like, you get to be the captain for the day. You get to be the captain for when it goes down. And it was just kind of like, you know, I feel like, you know, it was acknowledged, oh, he's the first British Asian prime minister, but I think most people were just like, okay, but is he actually gonna like help me sort out my mortgage? What's he actually going to do? So yeah, I feel like it is. Is it monumental? Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
You know, that he's become the prime minister. It's actually quite weird. Like, his trajectory has been quite fast paced. In 2015, became the MP for Richmond. By 2022, he was the prime minister. He has basically done like the football equivalent, like a road to glory. That and he's done that with politics. So yeah, I mean, it's impressive in the sense that within like 7 years, he's been able to achieve that. But it's at what cost?
No, I guess it's just like, because, so like from my background, so I went to private school. My parents sent me to private school, like quite an expensive private school, and like I feel like they like, obviously I come from some like relative privilege, obviously, because I was able to afford that. But I feel like my parents worked very hard and put education at the forefront. So it wasn't necessarily that we could afford it easily, it was that this was the number one priority. So I just wonder if there's a way to tell Rishi Sunak's story in a way of saying, oh, this is a guy whose parents worked hard to send him to a good school so that then he could do X, Y, and Z, and then now look where he is.
But this is what I find interesting, because I often hear this argument when people go to private school, and it's like, you know, my parents worked really hard. It's almost like inadvertently suggesting that parents who don't send their children to private school don't work very hard either. Which obviously isn't the case. For me, for private school, I'd abolish all of them. I don't see the point.
Really?
And I think the fact is, right, and it's like, it's, you know, you're basically, as a parent, you are acknowledging that there are so many discrepancies in this country and there's so much inequality that you have to bend like over backwards in order to give your child the best opportunity in life in order to try and succeed. You shouldn't have to do that. You should be able to send your child to the local comprehensive and for them to be able to get the qualifications that they need to become the best person that they can be. You shouldn't have to be spending like $7,000 a school term, I think, something like that, 7-8 grand.
Depends.
So when, obviously, like, depends on the school, but like, you know, so when you see a lot of like this sort of like middle class uproar about like Labour's proposed plans to add on VAT onto private school fees, which I don't think they're even going to do anymore. It's kind of, and you get all like these people like, oh, I don't know. It's like, well, you know, let's suggest all the stuff that they say about when people can't afford to live. Or have you tried cutting down on avocado on toast, like fancy coffee, all of that sort of stuff? You know, there's children that you had that you couldn't, you know, there's children you had when you were financially skilled, and not. Why did you have kids that you couldn't afford? Dickhead! You know, like, that sort of thing. So again, I feel like with sort of like private education. We shouldn't need it. But again, this is what you find with a lot of people who want to succeed or like in politics, something like that. They follow like the career path. Like they try and go to Russell Group universities to try and get themselves in the best state. And you really shouldn't have to do that. And I feel like that's kind of where at least like the allegation, like career politicians and stuff like that.
Do you mind if I asked, did you go to...
I didn't go to private school.
You went to...
I went to state school.
Yeah.
A lot of people are really surprised by.
I
don't know whether it's just because
why.
like maybe because of the way that I speak. Or
Well, I guess you're called the champagne socialist.
Yeah, I know.
I guess that implies
that being what I always say is that I went to state school. I went to a church school when I was younger. Then went to state school. I'm not religious, but my parents were obviously very well off, and I was afforded a lot of privileges that maybe some people from state school wouldn't have had. You know, I went on holiday every year. I saw a lot of cultural landmarks. I've been all over. I was sort of very fortunate in that regard. You know, I can ski. Which is kind of like
literally says it all.
Kind of litmus test. I've been able to ski since I was 5. But in fairness, my old pal lived on the side of a mountain, so like it would have been rude not to.
Yeah, of course.
So you know, like it's one of those ones, and I'm grateful for the opportunities, and I don't let it like blind my thing there. And I think it kind of says more about someone when they can experience privilege and then say, you know, everyone should be able to experience that and not have to slap themselves silly to try and achieve it.
So can I ask about the private school thing generally? I think we all agree with the principle that you shouldn't have to.
Yeah.
It shouldn't have to be like that. Would you practically like actually make it illegal, or is this like an idealistic thing where you're like, this is what I wish would happen? Like, what would you actually do?
I feel like with my stance on private schools is a bit like with the monarchy. I'd love to abolish the monarchy, but realistically that's never going to happen because on the top of people's priorities, no, the monarchy is just kind of there. Do you know what I mean? It's not like they are like our overlords and we're like in a French-style situation where we're going to go knock on their door and be like, right, get the fuck out. Yeah. So with private schools, I think from that perspective as well, it's like, look, I would love to have them abolished and basically still have them there, but just try and for everyone there sort of within the area. Obviously, that's not going to happen.
Yeah.
I would definitely increase fees. I think the other thing is removes charitable status.
Yeah, that is messed up.
Where basically they are exempt from paying tax.
That is wild.
Which is going to kind of lead them into later life when their students are then, you know, going to be ahead of hedge funds and stuff like that, and they're figuring out how to avoid paying tax on their millions. So I don't think that's right, and I think a lot of people would look at that and go like, yeah, no, that is wrong that these schools have charitable status.
Yeah.
But yeah, I guess from the perspective of actually sort of getting rid of them, I think it's more idealistic than practical. I think it would just be like, okay, like we need to make it a more even playing field and using the money that is generated from scrapping charitable status when they start paying tax and invest that into state education. I think it was the case, I think in Denmark or Finland, it was definitely a Scandinavian country where they found that where parents who send their kids to private schools found that the state comprehensive was much better than the private school, so they removed their kids from the private school and sent them to the comprehensive. And I think it's about just trying to make things more equal.
It's just such a shame because even like on the international stage, like the thing that I was always told as a kid is like English state schools are like, if you include those in the world ranking, the UK is like top 50.
Because when you left Zimbabwe, how old were you?
I was 8, so that was 2007.
Right, so then you were kind of like looking at that sort of situation. Was that what you were told like growing up?
You
spent like your like preschool and like school in
Zimbabwe. So basically the first 8 years of my life. And Zimbabwe is also, it's a very like because of the history, like it's a former colony, so we were always like aware of what's going on in the UK.
One of my older teachers at school was from Zimbabwe, and I remember showing us some footage, and he turned around to us one day. He was like, "Have you ever experienced tear gas?" And it was like, no. He's like, I have.
Of course. Yeah.
McCann, I loved him.
Yeah.
It was great.
But yeah, no, that's the thing. And so I was always told, like, if you include state schools or comprehensive schools or whatever, England's in like the top 50. Yeah. If you include private schools, it throws it up to like the top 5 in the world. And that discrepancy is crazy. The fact that that's even allowed to exist.
I think everyone wants like an English education is what you want for your kids.
Yeah.
It's like, do you?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, man. Yeah. Because I always have this. Yeah. I always have this argument with one of my friends who also says get rid of like private schools and stuff, and like obviously I understand the sentiment and I agree with I wish it wasn't the case.
Yeah.
But the only thing that I always come back to is the fact that it's like, to me, it's not necessarily the schools.
Yeah.
It's the family.
Yeah.
Like, it's yeah, sure, if you got rid of private schools today, or like even if private schools didn't exist and they never existed, the ultimate differentiating factor is the system we live in, like the capitalist system we live in. So ultimately, if you have money, rich people will always find a way. And I don't know if that's just a lazy
argument. And I think there's exemptions as well, particularly with like SEN schools where you have to pay a fee in order to get the help that you need. But again, I think going back to that, it's sad that in order to get your child the support that they need, you have to break your back in order to afford to do that. You should be able to send them to the local comprehensive, and for them to be able to get the support that they need. You know, I went through the SEN stuff, and it's awful, like the service that gets provided, and it's just like the schools are so fucking corrupt. My school had my name down on the SEN register, and I received none of the funding, yet they took the funding from me.
Really? Oh man, that's awful.
No, I won't name the school. I'll spare their blushes. But it is just one of those things where it's like, you know, it is pretty shit situation.
Yeah.